Once upon a time, there was a beautiful stamp set from LDRS Creative called Autumn Tales. Hey everyone, it's Cassie. Today we're going to be doing some really easy vintage storybook style coloring on these gorgeous autumn tale stamps. Now before you get scared off, I promise this is beginner friendly, very easy to do, and is a great way to dip your toes into watercoloring. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll be working on LDRS Creative watercolor paper. This is a white, smooth watercolor paper, which is great for stamping on. I will also be using coffee bean ink. This is a dark brown ink. I find the brown to be just a little bit softer than the black, which is perfect for that vintage vibe. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp my bunny. I'm going to stamp her a couple of times. That's very common for watercolor paper. I'm using the LDRS Creative Extreme Clean to get the ink off of my stamp. Because I like to do no-line watercoloring, I like to make sure my stamps are really clean, and this is a great cleaner. I'm also going to stamp some pumpkins down here, just so that you can kind of see how I color different images from this set. Before I start coloring, I want to make sure the ink is dry, so I'm just going to heat set that with my heat gun. I'll be using two paintbrushes for this, one to add paint and the other to add clean water. I've also chosen a variety of muted granulating colors, but go ahead and use whatever colors speak to you. Now this is so simple and fast. I am going to be showing this in real time, which I usually can't do. I usually have to speed things up for the videos. I'm going to start with the fur, so I've chosen a brown color, and I'm just adding some color where the shadows would be. I'm not really trying to add shadows, I'm just putting it where the darkest color will be, and then pulling it out gently with some clean water. Now, we don't need this to be perfect. You can leave little white gaps. I'm letting the highlight of the face be practically white, and I'm just going to let it be like this. I'm not going to mess with it a whole lot. I'm not going to add multiple layers and build lots of shadows. I'm just putting some paint on in the darkest area and then moving it with the water. So I've done both the ears. Get the little hand. So again, I'm just putting it in the shadows, pulling it out. You want to rinse off your water brush fairly often because you do want it to be clean water that you're introducing each time. If you get too much water on your brush, go ahead and touch it to a towel and it will absorb the extra water. For the back leg, I just put the whole thing in the dark color because that would be the shadow, and just added a little bit of color to that front foot. While the face is still wet, I'm going to dab in just a little bit of a soft pink for a rosy cheek. The water should let that color just soften and melt into the fur. I'm also adding that same pink to the inside of the ear in the same way that I did the fur, adding color to the darkest area and pulling it out with the clean water. Now that the face is basically dry, it looks a little bit too pale right underneath the brim of the hat, so I'm adding just the tiniest bit of paint right there and pulling it out, still leaving a fairly large highlight. As you're working, you want to make sure you are working near areas that are dry. If you work next to a wet area, your colors are likely to bleed across the lines, and that can be a frustrating mess to deal with. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the tail. I'm just using a soft gray for this, putting just a tiny bit of color right at the bottom, and then I'll soften that line just a little bit, but I'm leaving a very large highlight because this is a white tail. If you get too much of your shadow gone, you can add just a little bit more paint in there, but we want it to basically be white with just a hint of a shadow. If watching me paint in real time is just painfully slow for you, don't forget you can always adjust your playback speed. Next, I'm moving to the apron, and I've chosen a grayish blue color for the apron. So I'm going to just get the paint on my brush, and then once again add it into where I want the darkest color to be. So right up near that top, under the pumpkin, under the arm, and kind of following those folds. And then I'm just going to pull it down with that water. Again, we are not looking for perfection here. It's okay to have some messy areas, some areas that just are white. That's fine. We aren't looking to completely perfectly fill in every little space. We're just giving that hint of color. So I've also popped in a little bit of that dark color underneath the apron where those folds, where you kind of see underneath the folds. And I'm adding more color to the back and the bow of the apron. It is really tempting to keep fussing with and messing with it, but I promise the less you mess with it, the better it will look. Just relax and trust the process. I want to kind of limit the number of colors that I'm using on this to keep things nice and simple. So I'm reusing that same color that I used for the apron for the underskirt. I'll do a quick zoom in here so you can see what I mean when I say I am not worrying about being perfect here. You can see those little white gaps where I haven't gone all the way to the line, and that's fine. It gives it character and it's perfect for this style. I promised I would do the coloring in real time, so you get to watch paint dry with me for a minute. You have to make sure that we're not working next to a wet area, so I'm letting the apron and the underskirt dry before I can go in and paint the dress. But because we aren't using very much water, it shouldn't take very long. For the dress, I've chosen a brownish green color, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. Put the color where the shadows would be, then pull it out with that clean water. There isn't a lot of color difference between that skirt and the apron, especially on camera. You see more of a difference in person, but that's okay. Those very subtle colors just add to that vibe. But if you want brighter colors or more difference between your colors, choose whatever colors you want to work with. While I have my green out, I'm going to go ahead and do my pumpkin stem. While that stem dries, I'll jump up to the hat. I've chosen kind of an orange yellow for the hat. Nice straw hat for fall. Just adding in a little bit of color right underneath and behind those leaves on her hat and pulling that color out. And then I'll add some darker color under the brim. I'm going to use that same blue that I used in her apron for the little leaves or flowers or whatever you want to have them be on her hat. Now, because I didn't really wait for the hat to dry completely, there's a little bit of color bleeding, but that's okay. I figure leaves can be multicolored and that works. To finish her off, we need to do her pumpkin. So I have a beautiful pumpkin color. I'm just adding in that dark color right up underneath the pumpkin and under her hand, and then letting the top of the pumpkin be the highlight. Because all of my other colors are fairly muted and the pumpkin is a little bit more vibrant, I'm taking my time to make sure it doesn't get too washed out as I want it to kind of be the focal point of the bunny. It will also tie into the other pumpkins that I am going to color. These pumpkins are fairly simple images and great to practice on. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom you in so you can really see what I am doing with my paint and my brush. I'm doing the same thing that I did with the bunny, putting the color in the shadows, and then I'll pull it out and soften the edges with that water brush. Letting it be a little bit messy, seeing some of those brush strokes, leaving some of those white gaps, really gives it a lot of character. So don't get too hung up on perfection and don't overthink it. Just kind of add color in and have fun with it. You can see as I keep messing with this little pumpkin and trying to fix little things, it's actually losing some of its character. I'm not saying that having perfectly filled in pumpkins is wrong. If that's what you like to do, you do you. But if you like that loose style, just take this as your permission to take the pressure off of yourself of being perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. It should, however, be enjoyable. So, however you like to color these images, have fun with it. Now that we have everything colored, we can use the coordinating die set to cut out the various pieces and create our card. If, however, you don't want to do the die cutting and you want to have just kind of a vignette kind of look like you would on a storybook page, I probably wouldn't have stamped the pumpkins down here, but I did that for demonstration purposes. To create the vignette, we're going to add just a very, very simple background. I promise I'm keeping this simple. Let me zoom you in. Ignoring the pumpkins, we're adding some dark color right underneath our bunny. This will help ground her. Then I'm going to take that water brush and move that pigment around and soften the edges, leaving that dark spot right underneath the bunny. Now I'm flipping it over and gently touching that wet brush just to the edge of that paint. That will let it kind of spread upward a little, softening that edge. If you need to add a little bit more dark paint in there, go ahead and do that. Sometimes you end up losing too much of your shadow when you're adding the water in. I like to have kind of ragged, jaggedy edges where the color ends and meets the white page. That's my preference. Kind of gives it more of that storybook vibe. For my blue, I'm adding in just a very, very soft blue, keeping the color darkest near the ground and right around the bunny. So it gets lighter as it moves away from the bunny and as it moves higher up the page. Then I'm using clean water just to soften those edges and let them be jaggedy and messy like the ground is. That is how simple it is to put in a vignette background. I absolutely love doing this kind of watercolor. It is so relaxing. In this card, you can see how I did the vignette style on that main piece, and then I cut out the pumpkins. Instead of doing the sky, though, I just spattered some blue on there, so it's just speckles. Then I have those die-cut pumpkins just popped up right in front. I really hope that this tutorial has helped you feel a little bit more confident trying out watercolors, especially with this vintage storybook style image. It is really fun. If you do give it a try, be sure to share with us in the LDRS Creative Facebook group so that we can see your work. We love to see it. If you have any questions about watercolors or watercolor techniques, be sure to leave a comment below or ask in the Facebook group and tag me so that I can help you out. I hope you have a fabulously creative day, and I'll see you soon.